We're now going to finish our lecture on infancy cognitive development by talking about how babies learn language. So now we've learned about how language processes and progresses and develops. Now we're going to talk about how babies actually learn it. So there is a sensitive period for learning language. This is believed to occur before puberty. There's evidence that different parts of the brains are used for second language learning both before and after puberty. So before puberty we use one part of our brain to learn a new language, and after puberty we use a different part of our brain. So many aspects of language can be learned later in life, but syntax is the hardest. Remember, that's the grammar. There are periods where learning is easier, however. The younger we are, the easier we learn a new language. So do we learn language through nature or nurture? Learning theorists, the behaviorists, say that verbal interactions with others are all important. There's evidence that the child-directed speech works so well. Babies imitating what they hear is proof that it's the verbal interactions that are most important. If they don't hear language, they'll never learn language. So that would be the nurture perspective. So the nature perspective would say that baby is born with wiring for language acquisition. We're born with it in our brains. And that wiring is triggered when he hears adults and older children speak. So there are different perspectives, but learning language is a complex interaction between nature and nurture. Most psychologists believe that rather than a special linguistic processor for language acquisition, normal nervous system maturation is the key for children to develop higher language abilities. Children love infant-directed speech. We've talked about this before. It's called motherese or parentese. This is when you talk at the baby, usually making eye contact. You pitch your voice higher, you use simpler words, you exaggerate the intonation of the sentence and which words are stressed. This is not baby talk. Baby talk is when you look at a baby and just say nonsense words and syllables. Baby talk is not helpful for learning language, but this motherese, this infant-directed speech, is incredibly helpful. And I found a link that shows you an example of it if you don't know what I'm talking about. But anyone who's been around a baby probably instinctively uses this speech. It's really funny. Even if you put a young kid, like a toddler or preschool, in front of a baby, they will also use this infant-directed speech. They will pitch their voices higher, and it's hilarious to hear. Babies do learn language through imitation. They will hear a sound and try to reproduce it. There's actually something called echolalia, which we start to see it around 10 to 12 months. It has the word echo in it. It means it's a repetition of a sound or a syllable, usually the last one they heard. It's just an imitation, an echo of what you said, so to speak, but it helps them learn. So they hear a sound and they just repeat it over and over. There is a role for operant conditioning in learning language. Remember, that's the use of reinforcement and punishment to shape behavior. So when babies say something that sounds like a word, they get a positive response from adults. So they're more likely to make that sound again. When they say something that isn't a word, the response isn't as positive, so they're less likely to do that. So operant conditioning does help babies learn language because they're getting the reinforcement of parental approval when they talk and use words. Parent engagement and responsiveness is really important. If parents engage with the infant, especially using language, the baby will obviously learn faster. Parents who respond to a baby's babbling as though it is a language will also encourage language development. These are the parents who, when the baby babbles, they hold the conversation. They go, "Oh yeah, really? Tell me more." And that helps the baby learn. So just having a parent engaging with them using language really helps them. There's something else called joint attention. This is when baby and adult are looking at the same thing and the adult names it. Usually the baby points. The adult looks where the baby is pointing and then says something like, "Yes, that's a bottle." Baby might then make a noise and adult repeats, "Bottle." This paying attention to the same thing really helps the baby learn words for things. It's called joint attention. So, should babies learn sign language? I mentioned it briefly. Infants are capable of using sign language before they can talk. It gives them a way to communicate before they have verbal language. And it can help baby and parent communicate with each other and avoid frustration. Does this mean you need to teach the baby the entire ASL? No. Just a few sign language words can really help, just some of the basic ones that they need the most. Teaching a baby sign language does not delay their verbal language acquisition as long as you continue to speak to them as well as using the signs. So what about bilingual children? Well, research shows that if you want your children to be truly bilingual, you really need to give them exposure to both languages before the age of 3. So children exposed to 2 languages before age 3 seem to have absolutely no problem learning both and becoming fluent in both. A 4 or 5-year-old can learn a new language quickly, however. So some research has shown that children who are bilingual have higher IQs. They score better on intelligence tests. They're better at grammar and prose. Prose is writing that's not poetry. And they're also better at some non-linguistic tasks, such as maintaining selective attention. So why is it? Why does knowing 2 languages improve all of these things? Well, the ability to inhibit distractions may come from learning when to use the appropriate language. They have to kind of tune out their impulse to use one language and use the one that is appropriate. By learning 2 languages at a young age, children learn that words are arbitrary and that sentences are constructed differently. So they learn early on that more than one word can mean the same thing, that there's more than one way to construct a sentence. This teaches them greater flexibility in thinking, and they have to be more proficient at the rules of the language since they have to tell 2 languages apart. So it's as though they have to know both languages better because they have to be able to distinguish between the 2. In short, teaching a baby 2 language is very beneficial and should be done from birth if possible. And the best way to do this is through live speakers. Babies aren't going to learn Spanish by just watching videos in Spanish. They need a human talking to them in a second language. So what are ways to encourage language in babies? Well, the first one's pretty obvious. Talk to your baby. They need to hear language to learn language. And just in talking to them, getting them to hear as many words as possible and engaging with them, usually with eye contact, joint attention, infant-directed speech, all of those things help baby learn language a lot. Talk to your baby as much as possible. Build on your baby's talking. If they point at a ball and say, "Ba," then you say, "Yes, that's a ball. That's a red ball. Do you like the ball?" So you're just taking their one little syllable and you're building on it, you're expanding on it. Narrate your activities. This may make you feel very silly, but babies are usually in the room with you. They're watching and listening to everything that you do. So instead of doing a chore like doing the laundry and just being quiet and sitting there in silence while your baby watches you, tell the baby what you're doing. Now I'm putting the clothes in the washing machine. And now I am adding the soap. And now I'm closing the door and running the washing machine. If you just tell them what you're doing, they're learning all sorts of words. And they're paying very close attention to what you say. Practice giving them simple commands. Go get the ball. Go to your room. Pet the dog. Things like that. Give them simple commands and let them practice doing it. And they learn from live speakers, not TV. There's a ton of videos out there like the Baby Einstein videos. No, the babies might be fascinated with them, but it's not actually going to teach them language. They need to hear a live speaker. They need the interaction with the person right there in front of them. And the number one thing you can do to encourage language development is read. Read to your baby. Reading does so many good things. It teaches language. It helps with the attachment bond. It helps baby learn about all sorts of things, not just language. You're usually holding them close, usually cuddled on your lap while you're reading a book together. And it's a very, very rich bonding time. And it really, really helps them learn language. So even though baby is young and doesn't know any words yet, a lot of people would think, well, there's no point in reading to them. They don't understand what I say. As soon as a baby can sit and pay attention, read them as many books as possible. This is the best way to encourage language. That's all I have for this lecture. If you have any questions, please post them on the Blackboard forum.